Hello, and welcome to this video about the astrological influences of 2025. I'm Jamie Kahl Miller of Pandora Astrology. I'm a consulting astrologer. I see clients in the San Francisco Bay Area and have done for the last 30 years or more. In this video, we're going to take a look at what the outer planets are up to in 2025. We're going to look at all 6 of the outer planets: Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, Chiron, Saturn, and Jupiter. And we're going to talk about the sign each one is in and what that means for us in 2025. Along the way, I'll show you the degree span that every planet is traveling through, which will give you a clue about whether you're having a transit of that planet this year. And I'll suggest ways you can handle these transits for the best benefit. Let's get started. There are some really big changes coming this year because in 2025, 4 of the 6 outer planets are changing signs, while 2 planets continue in their same signs. One of these is Pluto, which has moved into Aquarius as of last year, and it's going to be staying there for another 19 years or so. The other one is Chiron, which is continuing along in Aries, where it's been for some years. Planets moving into a new sign include Neptune and Saturn, both of which are leaving Pisces this year and shifting into Aries. And then we also have Uranus, which is leaving Taurus and entering Gemini. And we have Jupiter, which is going to finish out its Gemini span from last year in the beginning of this year and move on to travel through Cancer at the end of 2025 and into 2026. I'm going to tell you how each of these planetary sign changes feels, and I'll be giving you some important dates when changes happen. Let's start with the slowest of these, which is Pluto. Pluto starts the year in very early Aquarius, right here at 1 degree. Over the course of the year, it travels along through Aquarius, reaching 3 degrees, turning retrograde on May 4th, and then continuing to back up to 1 degree and turning direct on October 13th. So Pluto's span this year is in Aquarius, a fixed sign, and it travels up to 3 degrees and back to 1 degree. So what this means for you is if there's anything in your chart at all from 1 to 3 degrees of any fixed sign, which means Leo, Aquarius, Scorpio, or Taurus, then that piece of your chart, that planet or point in your chart, is receiving a Pluto transit this year, and it's going to be going through a major transformation. It'll be a real death and rebirth experience. It could get messy. And if you want to know more about it, you can get a really precise diagram from me in a reading, which will show you the exact dates when this is at its most intense, its peak transformation intensity. And also, we'll let you know when it's going to be over. That can be really good to know when you're having a Pluto transit. So what does Pluto in Aquarius mean? Well, first of all, Pluto is about transformation and metamorphosis, death and rebirth. It really does put us through the emotional ringer in the sense that we feel like a caterpillar changing into a butterfly. We feel like we go into meltdown. We want to cocoon ourselves. We feel like we're going through a really big emotional change. We feel delicate, sensitive, like we want to be alone. We feel like we're walking through a really dark place in our own psychology or in our experience at the time of the transit. There comes a moment at the end of the transit when we feel like we're breaking out of that cocoon and into a whole new world, a whole new way of being. We often find that it's worth it. It's worth all the trouble and pain that we've gone through. It's worth all that we've had to let go of and even sacrifice during the Pluto transit. It's worth all of the trusting our own process of change that we had to do during the Pluto transit, when we fly away into a whole new life as a butterfly of our former selves. Now, what does Pluto mean in Aquarius? Aquarius has to do with friends and friendship, tribe and community, networks and networking. And that's not just limited to human networks of social networks, your friends, the peeps that you hang out with, the peeps that you work with. It's not just about those. It's also about computer networks, therefore the internet, therefore the whole world of things that are electrical and electrified, so technology in general, and internet, computer, software related tech in specific. And really, Aquarius governs science itself. So we can expect really big changes in this whole life arena for a lot of people this year. We could probably expect a lot of volatility in the tech sector involving very Plutonian behavior, which is to say, power grabs, manipulation, control games. So if you have tech stocks, I would keep an eye on those pretty closely. And I would also be cautious about relying too much on the grid. Now, Pluto's going to be in Aquarius for 20 years, another 19 or so. And so I'm not telling you that you should get off the grid and move on to a farm and have no electricity for the next 19 years, because that's pretty hard to do. And you aren't going to want to do that, which is fine. But I am saying that there is going to be some centralization, some concentration of power going on in this arena of life this year and for much of the next 19 years. And it's good to approach it with some skepticism and some caution. If you yourself are having a Pluto transit this year, you should check out my video about how to handle your Pluto transit. I'll put a link for it in the description below. Okay, now we'll take a look at Neptune. Neptune starts the year in 27 degrees of Pisces, so heading for the end of Pisces, traveling forward and traveling all the way up to 1 degree of Aries right here, and even 2 degrees where it goes retrograde on July 4th, and then continuing retrograde back to 29 degrees here, where it goes direct again in early December. And then finishes out the year still in 29 degrees of Pisces. So Neptune's travel span this year is up to 2 degrees of Aries, back to 29 degrees of Pisces, which means that you're going to feel this in all the mutable signs, meaning Pisces, Virgo, Gemini, and Sagittarius, in 29 degrees of those signs, and also in the very early part of all the cardinal signs, 0 to 2 degrees of Aries, and also Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn. Neptune does linger in its 2024 span in the early part of the year, as long as it's going through 27 and 28 degrees. Once it leaves 28 degrees and moves into 29 degrees, it's begun its span for this year. And what that means is if you have something in your chart in 27 or 28 degrees of a mutable sign, Neptune was transiting that last year, and it'll be over by March. And that's a really good thing to know, because Neptune transits can be so confusing. They can be times when we feel foggy, spacey, like we can't rub two brain cells together and create an actual thought. You may be tired. You may feel a sense of general malaise and disinterest in things that you always used to be interested in. You may genuinely need more sleep. Additionally, you might feel like you're spinning your wheels in some area, efforting and efforting and efforting and getting nowhere. And that might even seem to be what's going on. But there's a beautiful meaning behind this transit that makes it all worth it in the end. This transit is designed for a spiritual reset. This transit is designed to make you withdraw from the material world with all of its concerns, all of its glories and riches, and instead to retreat inward and get in touch with your spiritual value system and ask yourself, what is going to matter after I die? And what will I care about on my deathbed? And based on my life purpose, why do I bother doing the things that I do? Why should I care? A Neptune transit can bring a great big disillusionment where you used to be living in a fantasy bubble. And it can end with a restoration of faith after getting in touch with what really matters, not to your everyday self, which needs to make money and eat and craves status and glory, but your eternal self that experiences this life as a drop in the great river of all the lives that you've ever lived. That's Neptune's perspective. So Neptune has been traveling along through Pisces. Pisces is Neptune's own sign. And so this has been a very dreamy period and a 14-year period in which we've been almost dreaming about the dream itself. There's been a lot of spiritual exploration, but there's also been a lot of escapism. There's been a massive expansion in film and video media. During Neptune in Pisces, we've seen a lot of changes and a lot of expansion in the realm of television and movies. Binging has become a thing, and a lot of the content is fantasy-based. Also, in this 14-year period, we've had a really massive expansion of everyday people making video content and posting it where masses of other people can see it. Talking about YouTube, and there's been a lot of development of software for filming that now anybody can use to create a film that looks so much more professional than what could be accomplished 100 years ago or less. And you don't need to have a great big studio to do it either. So Neptune in Pisces has really expanded our relationship with visual media in particular and allowed us to build a very unrealistic fantasy and present that to the whole world for them to participate in. But Neptune is about to move on into Aries, and this is going to be such a different vibe. Aries is the sign ruled by Mars. It's the warrior, the hero, the athlete, the forceful, willful, self-determined side of us. Now, whatever sign Neptune moves through, it casts a kind of a fairy glamour over it. It makes it more sparkly, more shiny. So despite that we're just now coming out of a really long streak of movies based on comic book heroes and villains, I think we're going to see potentially even more of that kind of black and white, good versus evil, hero versus villain scenario in the films that are going to come out while Neptune is in Aries. Neptune spends about 14 years traveling through a sign, and it's just beginning to move through Aries. So it's going to be in Aries from about 2025 through 2039. So while Neptune is in Aries, you might find that heroism is glorified, but also war itself is glorified. And being war prepared may be glorified. Doing battle, approaching things like a warrior, like a soldier, it may be glorified. It may be, there may be a very rose tint on that. But I want to tell you something to watch out for in all of this. The hero, and here I'm speaking of a self-proclaimed hero because we're all a hero of our life story. Nobody styles themselves as the villain. If they turn out to be the villain, it's usually to their surprise. But I will tell you one trait of villains, and this is how you can spot them. And that is that a villain who may have started out with a very good cause or a wound that they want to heal. That's often part of a villain's origin story, right? And it makes a villain a sympathetic character. So the villain may start out with the best of intentions, but how they pursue their heroism, how they proceed to be heroic, how they pursue their heroic goal will involve an awful lot of the ends justifying the means and an awfully big desire to pursue this goal no matter what, no matter who you run over, no matter whose lives you destroy, no matter who you disenfranchise, no matter who you regard as less valuable or less human than yourself, no matter who you want to crush under your heel. And that would be the enemy, right? Every hero has an enemy. The Aries story is a very black and white story. It's the story of the new sheriff in town, the guy with the white hat, who's come in to remove all the criminals. And the criminals are the ones wearing the black hat. But even the hero can become the villain if they will stop at nothing to achieve their goal. and especially if they refuse to acknowledge the other person's humanity on the way to their goal. So Neptune in Pisces transits that you might have this year would involve any planets that you have in any of the mutable signs, meaning Pisces, of course, but also Virgo, Sagittarius, and Gemini. And any of those planets being impacted by transiting Neptune in Pisces may become a side of you that feels that sense of general malaise that I spoke of before, that disinterest, that tiredness. And it's probably a good idea for you to literally get more sleep this year. And that is a perfectly legitimate way to spend a Neptune transit. Now, once Neptune moves into Aries, if you have any planets in 0, 1, or 2 degrees of any of the cardinal signs, so Aries, Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn, then you'd be feeling this. And you might feel very caught up in a glorified, heroic, larger than life story. You might feel the need to go to battle, and you might feel that your particular battle, your campaign, is so sanctioned by a higher power, God, that as an instrument in God's hands, whatever you do is justified. And that's just not the truth. And it might just lead you into behaviors that acquire karma in this lifetime that you'll just have to unpack in a future one. So consider that before you act. Okay, now let's talk about Uranus. Uranus starts the year in the sign of Taurus right here. And this year will travel forward into Gemini, very early Gemini, and then back up into Taurus again. Uranus has been in Taurus from 2018 to 2025. It's finishing out that sign this year, and will continue in Gemini and spend 2025 to 2033 in the sign of Gemini. So Uranus starts out the year moving in a backwards direction. Quickly, it turns direct right here, January 30th, and then proceeds on and finishes out Taurus, moving into early Gemini, turns retrograde again towards the fall of the year, and that's September 5th, and then proceeds backwards until year end, finishing the year at 27 degrees of Taurus. So this means in the beginning of the year, Uranus will still be finishing out its span from last year. And it won't be done with its 2024 span until it leaves 26 degrees during May. Let's see that happen. Okay, so here it is in 26 degrees, and there it has left 26 degrees for 27 degrees. So if you had a Uranus transit going last year in 23 to 26 degrees, that will be ending in May. And that's kind of a useful thing to know because Uranus transits can be super disruptive. Uranus transits can bring a radical shift in perspective that changes everything. Changes how you look at something, how you experience something, how you feel about something, and what you do about something. When Uranus transits happen to a relationship planet, for example, you can end a relationship unexpectedly or find that it ends unexpectedly, or enter into a relationship unexpectedly and find yourself experimenting with the type of person that you can relate to. Similarly, Uranus transits that happen in the realm of career and finance can also be super disruptive and create big changes and radical leaps for you financially or career-wise. And those could be radical leaps upward into a new stratosphere that you're unfamiliar with and have to scrabble to stick to, or a radical leap downward, like suddenly being fired or suddenly, losing a bunch of value in your stock portfolio. Or it can be a radical leap sideways off of the map in which you have been used to experiencing your career and onto a map that's very different. For example, let's say you get the wild idea to quit your job, which has, all of the benefits that go with it, and start something on your own, in which case you have to arrange for all of your own insurance and keep your own books. And it's a whole new map. The Uranus year can be a really good year to make some of these big changes, but they usually involve a lot of disruption and they can be very hard to settle into. And you don't really feel settled into it until the Uranus transit is over. Now, that's a valuable piece of information that you can get in a reading with me where I show you a diagram which lays out in time exactly how long the transit lasts, when it starts, when it finishes, and when it's peaking in terms of its intensity and the sheer disruptive nature of it, and how agitated you can feel during those passages. There's a link for getting a reading with me in the description below. And the one thing I really want to add to that is that Uranus transits can really break stuff if you don't know they're coming. But if you do know that they're coming, they can be magnificent and they are absolutely harnessable. So Uranus is finishing out its travel through Taurus and moving on into Gemini this year. Taurus is not a comfortable place for Uranus. Uranus is actually in its sign of fall in Taurus. And if you think about it, it makes perfect sense because Uranus is all about radical change and it's very cerebral, very much about ideas that are theoretical and non-concrete. And Taurus is like a millstone around Uranus's neck. Taurus is very practical, very pragmatic, very grounded in the physical and the real. Taurus likes to move slowly. Taurus hates change. And Taurus rules finance. So when Uranus is in Taurus, we can have radical changes barreling through the financial sector. And that's gone on because we've had just an astonishing development in, the world of crypto. Cryptocurrency is absolutely ballooned while Uranus was in Taurus. And it's incredibly volatile, which makes perfect sense for a Uranus transit. Perhaps we can expect some slowing down and solidifying in the financial sector after Uranus moves out of Taurus. And perhaps even crypto will become more solid and more reliable. I don't know. It'll be interesting to watch, won't it? Uranus does, however, really like being in the sign of Gemini. Gemini is an air sign. Uranus rules Aquarius, which is also an air sign. And so there's a lot of congruity between these two archetypes. Gemini is a sign of thinking, learning, and communication. So we can expect a lot of the buzzy energy, the agitation of Uranus to be happening in this communication sector of life as Uranus moves into Gemini. And if I had to guess, I would think that we're going to learn a lot about the spectrum, the neurodivergence spectrum. I think we're going to learn a lot about how to manage ADHD and autism and everything between. We'll probably gain knowledge, scientific knowledge about how these things work with some more useful labels for them, useful treatments perhaps, useful diagnoses, and more functionality for this sector of the population. And the reason I'm putting a positive spin on this Uranus transit through Gemini is because they're congruent. They're both air. And so Gemini is happy to have Uranus step in for a visit, and Uranus is happy to travel through Gemini. And it's going to feel a lot nicer, I think, than Uranus's passage through Taurus. At the end of 2025, Uranus will still be in Taurus, 27 degrees, but will turn direct in February of 2026 and then rapidly move out of Taurus and into Gemini to stay for another 6 or 7 years. Okay, let's move on to Chiron. Chiron is the wounded healer, a really fascinating and deep archetype. Chiron starts the year in 19 degrees of Aries and will be in Aries all year. Chiron spends the first couple of months traveling along the span that it's finishing out from last year. Chiron is finished with its 2024 span as of late March 2025. And this is useful to know because if you've been having a Chiron transit already, lingering and hanging over from last year, then you might get a lot of relief from knowing that it's over. Chiron transits tend to bring up old wounding to the surface for healing, and that is an intrinsically uncomfortable experience. So if you have something in your chart that Chiron's been transiting, maybe because it's in 19, 20, or 21 degrees of any cardinal sign, then the good news is that transit will be over by the time March finishes in 2025. Chiron continues along Aries until going retrograde on July 30th, which happens in 27 degrees of Aries. And then Chiron proceeds to move backwards through the end of the year until turning direct in early January 2026. So if you have something between 22 degrees and 27 degrees of a cardinal sign, then that stuff is beginning to be transited by Chiron. So Chiron, as the wounded healer, does poke us where it hurts and bring old wounding up to the surface where it can be healed. Now, if you don't know you're having a Chiron transit, if you're unaware that that is what is driving the experience that you're in, then you would likely think that someone is hurting you in the present, or something outside of yourself is bringing you this pain. When you come to see that what is happening is really just triggering something old, then you can address that old thing and by healing it, prevent it from triggering you again in the future. This is the healing opportunity of a Chiron transit. So anything that you have in your chart between 22 degrees and 27 degrees of any cardinal sign at all is going to be affected by this. And you're going to find old wounding coming up in that area. It could be old wounding in your career arena, which is bringing up stuff about being respected as an authority. It could be old wounding in your relationship area, bringing up stuff about relationships that you've been in or partners that you've been with that have left you with that trigger, ready to be tripped by a Chiron transit. Now could be the opportunity to heal that stuff once and for all so that you don't have to carry that baggage into the future. And you'll find that this Chiron transit can affect things that you have in Aries, in that span 22 to 27 degrees, or things in Libra in that span, or in Cancer or in Capricorn. Chiron transits are not fun, but if you handle them well, they can result in you dropping ballast, losing that drag on your tail, moving forward into a future with less baggage and fewer triggers, and feeling more whole and self-integrated. And who doesn't want that? So what does Chiron mean in Aries in particular? Well, as I mentioned when I was talking about Neptune in Aries, Aries is the sign of the warrior, the pioneer, the athlete, the driven, forceful, willful, self-determined side of us. Aries prizes honesty and directness. Aries is transparent. Aries acts out what they're feeling. Aries is impulsive. I like to call Aries Captain Obvious sometimes. So what this means about the Chiron transit is that you may experience in your own life, or you may see this happening to people around you, or even people in the news, that a person is getting wounded for impulsive behavior, failing as a warrior, is wounding others from a warrior's perspective, and perhaps very self-righteously. Within yourself, you may notice that you can effect a powerful healing like never before, simply by being honest, by being direct, and perhaps by asserting yourself in ways that you've never had the courage to do before. This can bring an important new balance into your life. And that can be very healing and very self-integrating. A Chiron transit is another one that's really good to know about while it's going on. Because I've seen so many clients unaware that they're experiencing a Chiron transit just feel like life is out to hurt them, like God is out to get them, when that's not really what's going on. It's an opportunity to heal. And when you take that opportunity and you take it in the right timing, you can be left so liberated. The main approach to a Chiron transit is to let go of any idea that you're the victim of your circumstances, and to instead take charge of your life. And that's a really great use of Chiron in Aries. Okay, now it's time to look at Saturn. This year, Saturn is going to begin transitioning into Aries. It usually spends about 2.5 years in a given sign. It first entered Pisces during March of 2023. It's going to hop into Aries for a few months this year. We'll back into Pisces and then finally leave Pisces for good in February of next year, 2026. So here we see Saturn starting out in Pisces on January 1st this year. And we're going to watch it travel all the way along through Pisces, leaving its span for the year and entering into its span for the new year, which is 25 degrees of Pisces to 1 degree of Aries. So here it has already entered this year's span as of April of 2025, moving into 25 degrees of Pisces, traveling along, entering Aries right here during May of 2025, proceeding along and turning retrograde right here during July, backing up out of Aries into Pisces right here in early September, and then backing up to 25 degrees and turning direct in the end of November, early December, and finishing out the year still in Pisces and not quite done with its span this year. So if you were having a Saturn transit from last year, Saturn traveled from 12 degrees to 19 degrees of Pisces last year, and you'll still be feeling those transits finish out in the early part of the year in the springtime. That's going to actually happen pretty quickly. Here's Saturn in 19 degrees as of February. By the time February ends, Saturn has moved on into 20 degrees and has exited last year's span. So if you were having a super heavy, serious, burdensome Saturn transit last year, while it was traveling through 12 to 19 degrees of Pisces, by the end of February, that's going to be over. Really good news, right? You won't be under so much pressure from Saturn if that transit has lingered for you in this way. However, if you do have something at the end of mutable signs and the very tippy of the nose beginning of cardinal signs, then you're going to be entering into a Saturn transit this year. So Saturn's span this year is 25 to 29 degrees of all mutable signs, which means Pisces, but also Virgo, Sagittarius, and Gemini, and also 0 to 1 degrees of all the cardinal signs. Aries, certainly, but also Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn. So here's what you need to know about it. Whatever sign Saturn passes through is going to bring the hard lessons associated with that sign. Saturn in Pisces has brought hard lessons about being more empathetic or managing your empathy if you have an excess of it, about being more compassionate. It may have brought some hard lessons for the artists of the world because Pisces is very much a sign of artists. It may have brought spiritual lessons that are harsh for those of us who engage in spirituality. Saturn in Pisces has brought a reality check to sides of us that may be deluded or living in a fantasy world in some way. Saturn in Pisces can bring a disillusionment as reality comes crashing down all around you. Not fun, right? So Saturn is going to move on into Aries, and that may sound better because Aries is, more direct, more honest, more clear, also more motivated. Saturn in Pisces, not very motivated at all, and not very structured either. So Saturn in Aries might seem like a better situation. However, I regret to inform you that Saturn is in its sign of fall in Aries. And this is because Saturn is a side of us that wants to be very deliberate, slow-moving, consistent, building things up gradually over time. Saturn is all about being a person of substance whose word is golden. Aries is the opposite of many of these things. Aries is hasty, impulsive, direct, sometimes in ways that are very unsubtle. Aries cannot wait for things to unfold. Aries wants to push the action all the time, even in times when that's just not the right idea. Also, Aries is prone to anger. And this is really where Saturn in Aries becomes quite dark, because Saturn is the father figure, and Saturn in Aries can be a fierce, angry, thoughtless, heedless, and emotionally overbearing father figure that veers into abuse. While Saturn is in Aries, we need to learn to control our temper. We may need to learn hard lessons about asserting ourselves, and those lessons may come in moments in which we are being abused and we must push back. Sometimes that's how life presents those lessons, by putting you face to face with somebody who is pushing on you and crossing your boundaries so that you will push back. So when you consider how to respond to this transit, ask yourself, am I the one with the white hat on or the black hat on? Am I aggressing into somebody else's territory, or am I defending my own territory? What makes it my territory? Is it really my territory? How far am I willing to go to defend it? If I'm trying to take new territory, how far am I willing to go to do that? And does that leave me in the right or in the wrong from a greater moral standpoint? Like I said, Saturn brings the harsh lessons, and the best way to get through them is to learn them and to demonstrate that you've learned them. All right, let's finish this up with Jupiter. You know, part of why I like starting with Pluto is because I like getting the hard stuff over with so that I can end with dessert, which is definitely Jupiter, the most fun and growthful of the outer planets. 2025 begins with Jupiter right here, still pretty early in Gemini, and traveling backwards and going direct here in 11 degrees Gemini. So Jupiter is still very involved with its 2024 span and activity as 2025 begins. Jupiter then finishes out its 2024 span right here at the end of April. So if you've been having a Jupiter transit from last year, the time period through April is your last chance to get all of the goodies and squeeze all of that sweet juice out of the Jupiter transit that you've been having from last year. During the summer, Jupiter will quickly move on and leave Gemini right about here during June, and then move on into its span for the year. It comes up to 25 degrees of Cancer, where it goes retrograde in November, and then spends the rest of 2025 backing up in Cancer. It's going to ultimately back up to 15 degrees during 2026, and then proceed forward from there as 2026 continues unfolding. So Jupiter's span that's leaving is 11 to 21 degrees of mutable signs, Gemini, and moving on into 15 to 25 degrees of Cancer, i.e. cardinal signs. I talked about Jupiter in Gemini last year. You can check my video about that. I'm not going to say too much more about that right now. And I'll say a little bit about Jupiter in Cancer. It's not there yet, so we're not really feeling it yet. And I will make a fresh video when that arrives on the horizon. But I just want to say that Jupiter has struggled in Gemini because Gemini is its sign of detriment. And the passage of Jupiter through Gemini has been very agitating and very stimulating intellectually, but it's been very hard to focus and get things done because of all of the mental activity generated by Jupiter in Gemini. It's been a really good transit for learning, for getting better at communication, but it's also been a transit that's yielded a lot of words, possibly signifying not a whole heck of a lot. Jupiter's movement into Cancer is going to be great because Jupiter loves being in Cancer. This is the sign it's exalted in. And all of the wonderful Jupiterian warmth and benevolence can be expressed through the medium of universal mother love in the sign of Cancer. It's kind of the feeling of endless summer, and I look forward to saying more about it when I make a video about that mid-year. But what I want to tell you right now is that Jupiter transits are so wonderful. They are wonderful times to grow and expand, times when you feel like life is an adventure and you're feeling more confident than usual. So knowing where the opportunities are going to be happening for you this year is key to getting good use out of your Jupiter transit. Like when you're having a Jupiter transit to a relationship planet, people will pop out of the woodwork to date you. It's totally a relationship luck period. If Jupiter is transiting through your second house, you're in a money luck period. Money wants to make its way towards you. You need to open up avenues and paths along which money can flow towards you. If you're having a career luck period with a Jupiter transit, it's a really great time to move up to the next position, ask for better pay or better conditions, or look for something different into which you can grow. A Jupiter transit is a growth period, and it can be accompanied by a form of restlessness that makes you want to grow, that makes you want to run away from whatever is limiting you. Now, that obviously can go well or it can go badly, and really knowing the timing of the Jupiter transit is what makes all the difference. If you are the type of person who's temperamentally prone to cynicism or depression or a negative outlook, and you're not the kind of person who expects luck to be happening, knowing that a Jupiter transit is happening can make it possible for you to harvest all the luck that's waiting for you. Being told the timing in which you're having a Jupiter transit means you know when to pay attention for the luck and to allow yourself to hope for the luck and to bootstrap your self-confidence and go out and grab that luck and take advantage of those opportunities. Now, if on the other hand, you're the sort of person who's prone to overconfidence, maybe being overbearing, maybe overpromising and underdelivering, well, in that case, a Jupiter transit can make you downright insufferable. And maybe this isn't you, but maybe this is somebody you know, somebody who maybe comes to you for advice, and you could have their chart and you could know when this transit is happening for them, and then maybe they wouldn't blow it during a Jupiter transit. Because this type of person who is just too big for their britches in the first place can be blown up way so much bigger if they're having a Jupiter transit. And that can really do damage to all of their relationships. And if somebody in their life who cares about them knows when that transit is coming along and can advise them how to restrain themselves and cool it, then they can harvest wonderful luck from a Jupiter transit too. And the last thing I want to say about Jupiter transits is they are use it or lose it. While the transit is happening, while the transit is happening is the time to harvest the luck. That is the time to spot the opportunities. That is the time to form the connections. That is the time when you're radiating the charisma that other people are responding to. That is the time when you're expanding into your golden leadership. That is the time to place yourself in the social arena where you could meet a partner. That is the time to ask for a raise. That is the time to look for a new job. That is the time to grow your business. That is the time to sign a contract that will lock in that Jupiter luck into an instrument that will have a lifespan all its own. Whether it's a job contract or a new car, whatever it is, that turns into your good luck charm, and it's got the Jupiter energy baked right in. So the timing of those kinds of purchases can extend your Jupiter luck beyond the time frame of the actual transit. These are the sorts of clues you can get in a session with me, because the timing of this is very specific to you. You have your own unique Jupiter luck timing, and I can tell you when it is. Well, that's all for today. Thanks for watching this video all the way to the end. I love it when you do that. In this video, I gave you a lot of clues about what's coming in 2025 and how you can surf those transits instead of drowning in them. If you liked this video, please like it officially so that other people can find it and get the same wisdom you got today. Share it with all your friends and your community, and revisit my channel for more videos as the year unfolds. And remember, you can find me at pandoraastrology.com. And if you go to my services page, you can book a reading with me or find me on Patreon to learn more about astrology. And until next time, I'll see you on the cosmos. Bye-bye.